There's a lot of information that's been thrown at you already and will be through all 8 presentations today. So my only ask of you is that when thinking about Palisade, if you only take 3 concepts or 3 words away from what I'm about to present, then I'll be happy. And those words are tangible, essential, and predictable. Not necessarily words that you'd swipe right for on your Tinder or Bumble, but certainly what we'd swipe right for when we're looking for assets in the infrastructure space. So what do these words mean in practice? Firstly, tangible. It really goes to the heart of what infrastructure assets are. These assets are real. You can visit them, you can touch them. Often we use them every single day. And what I'd like to do briefly is show you a video where we condense, through the magic of TV, a 2.5-year construction of a wind farm that we built on the west coast of Tasmania into a little under 2 minutes. And I'll give you a little bit of commentary along the way as to how that came together. But Palisade was the developer, and then the builder, or managed the build of that project, and then we also now manage that on behalf of our investors. So being a relatively remote location, there were a lot of logistics that we had to take into account to get to this very remote site. As I mentioned, we developed this project over a number of years and put it into construction just before COVID started. We had to navigate the demands and the difficulties of COVID and getting access to Tasmania during lockdowns and so forth. And even things like the very large 60+ metre blades that you have to get to site. We had to close roads, remove telegraph poles, and do all sorts of things to enable this project to be built. And it's really just the scale of it you can see in this video that demonstrates the amount of logistics and the people required to get a project like this off the ground. It was a big contributor to the local economy while it was being built, with over 200 people who were involved in its construction. And now today, now that it's operating, it also serves over 40,000 homes in the west coast of Tasmania, and it was also the project that pushed Tasmania above the 100% renewable energy generation target that they set back in, I think it was 2018. Now the project is fully operational, and it's managed by a team of engineers and operating experts that we have based in Melbourne, and they're part of the broader Palisade group, who manage a lot of the investments that we have within our portfolio. And that's really just a window into one of 25 different assets that we manage across our portfolio. It's about a $4 billion Australian dollar portfolio that we manage day to day. So that's tangible. The next word I want you to take away is essential. And what we mean by essential is assets that we use every day that are essential to our lives, or also assets that we might not think about that much but are essential to the economy that we all live and operate in. So you can see here the first picture at the top there is the Monash Casey Hospital located in Victoria. That's a 25-year PPP asset, or public-private partnership asset, that we entered into a partnership with the Victorian government to design, build and now operate. Fortunately, if you go in there, you won't find me in a gown doing your open heart surgery. There's other people who manage that. My job and our job as infrastructure managers is to manage the facilities on behalf of the owner, and in exchange for that we receive a fixed payment every year from the government that escalates at CPI. Perhaps less visible on a daily basis is the Port of Portland in Victoria, which is a deepwater port located on the west coast of Victoria, we export about 1 million tonnes of wheat from that port to the Middle East, to Asia, to Europe each year. We also export about 170,000 tonnes of aluminium each year that go into making toasters and fridges and all sorts of things like that. So another example of the sort of essential services that our assets provide. The third word that I want you to take away, and one of the most important, is predictable. It's actually two words, more predictable, and that compliance team made me put that in there so we didn't upset ASIC. But what we mean by predictable is that the examples I've talked about, for example, the PPP assets, very predictable revenue streams. So we have contracts going out 25 years, fixed payments, escalating at inflation or CPI, and they're the sorts of assets that we look for in the portfolios that we manage. Another example with the wind farm that I showed you earlier is that we have long-term contracts in place to sell our electricity and the green credits to the Tasmanian government or through Hydro Tasmania, and again, inflation-linked revenues that are quite stable for a long period of time. And why is that important to us? Well, when you have long-term contracts in place, you can rely on long-term, fairly stable revenue streams, and of course, provided you can control your costs, which we generally do through long-term contracts, then that translates into stable returns for investors. And you can see $10,000 invested 10 years ago in our flagship fund has produced a net return, which I'll mention in a moment, that has exceeded both the S&P ASX 300 and also the Australian Bond Index. And what's really interesting, if I can point to the chart here, you can see the big dip in the market that happened in 2020 when COVID hit. Sure, we had a little bit of a dip and we owned some airports, so obviously they didn't have a great run during that time. But because we have a very diversified portfolio of 25 assets, the performance of the fund overall was not really materially impacted by COVID at all. And that's also reflected in the returns over the last 10 years, which through our diversified fund have delivered net total returns of around 9.7%, importantly of which about 5.5% is cash yield that we pay out each year to our investors. So they're the three key words that we use to describe infrastructure that we invest in and what we look for. But then the next question is, well, why Palisade? Why would you invest with us as experts in this space? This is a bit of an odd image, perhaps, but we took our inspiration when we were coming up with the Palisade logo from the ancient Greeks and Romans, who actually invented the word palisade, which is a fence of wooden stakes or iron railings to create a defensive or fortress-like structure. And hopefully this will translate to our logo, which is really meant to describe what is our core business, which is that we've been doing infrastructure investing for about 15 years now, since 2008, and this is really at the heart of what we do. So what are you getting when you invest in mid-market infrastructure with Palisade? Well, there's probably two key reasons for our success over this last 15 years and how we've been able to deliver our consistent returns. The first one is opportunistic acquisitions, and what we look for in what we call mid-market infrastructure are assets generally less than $1 billion in value, which means that we can generally buy up to 100% of assets, or at the very least obtain controlling stakes in those assets. And that goes to the second piece of our key success factor, which is that we have a team of people, investment professionals, but also asset management professionals who are dedicated to managing these assets in a very active way. And so we get the most out of the assets that we buy, and we do that over the long term, where we're talking 20, 30, 40-year investment horizons for the sort of assets that we own. And so how does that translate? Well, we've got a very diversified portfolio, as I mentioned, around 25 assets, spanning all the key subsectors of core infrastructure, both here in Australia, and then we've got some investments in the US as well. Part of the point, or the key benefit of buying, operating the mid-market and buying controlling stakes in assets and generally smaller value assets, is that we can assemble a very diversified portfolio. So we don't just have one or two huge investments where we're exposed to the outcomes of those investments. We've got a very diversified portfolio. And the benefit really of this as well is that these 25 assets exist today. So if you invest with Palisade, invest in our fund, you can see what you're buying. You can come and visit the assets. We'd be delighted to take you around a wind farm or a gas pipeline. But these assets are here in the ground, operating and delivering those returns. To wrap up, the three words, I've written them down for you just as a reminder: tangible, essential, and predictable. How do you access these investments? And that's the key reason for being here today, which is that for the very first time, as Emily mentioned before, we're making this investment available to wholesale investors, and we're doing that through Palisade's Feeder Infrastructure Trust. So it's a platform-friendly investment product available to wholesale investors. We're intending to have it rated by Lonsec and Zenith. We're going through that process at the moment, and it'll provide immediate access to the portfolio that I showed you on the previous slide, with a net target return of between 7 and 9%. So thanks very much for listening. Appreciate your time, and we look forward to welcoming you as investors to Palisade. Thank you.